Before I became a writer 20 years ago, I'd never given a speech like this. My job was a publicity director in publishing in New York. I worked for lots of different publishing houses, and my job was to set up appearances like this for Stephen King and Danielle Steele and all these, best-selling writers that you know. And I was very happy being behind the scenes, getting them on national television and getting their books reviewed. And then I wrote my first novel. It was published in 1994. And suddenly it was my turn to be in the spotlight. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified, panicked. And shockingly, I got on the Today Show for my very first novel in '94. And I was supposed to be thrilled, because you get to sell your books on national TV. I was in a panic. It's really different promoting somebody else from promoting yourself. And so I went to a doctor, and I said, I can't sleep, I don't know what I'm going to, what if I faint on television? And he said, well, here's a prescription for Xanax. Take one about 45 minutes before you go on the air, and it'll just take the edge off your nervousness. I'm telling you the story for a reason. So I had never heard of Xanax in 1994. I didn't know what to do with it. Okay, so it's a hot, steamy August morning in New York City. I show up at NBC in what I thought was a pretty blue dress to wear. And the producer takes one look at me and says, oh my God, the blue dress. So I said, what's wrong with the blue dress? I feel this giant lump in my throat, meanwhile, tears. He says, well, Katie Couric's wearing a blue dress today, you're going to clash. And off he went. And I reached into my bag and I took a Xanax. So then the makeup lady came and got me and ushered me down the hall to makeup, where she put that nice heavy TV makeup on one side of my face. And then her beeper went off because Brian Gumbel, who was still with the show then, was down on the street on this hot, steamy August morning doing a segment on barbecue with Martha Stewart, and his face got shiny with sweat. It was a makeup emergency. So off she went, leaving me with one side done and one side not, looking like that guy from Phantom of the Opera. And I reached into my bag and I took another Xanax. She eventually came back and finished me up, and I went to the set. And there was Katie in her blue dress, and there was I in my blue dress. And Katie asked me the first question that a lot of people were asking me. So Jane, how does it feel going from being a promoter of writers to being one? And I felt my eyes roll back in my head, and I said on national television, I don't know, I'm heavily sedated. I am Xanax free today. But the point is that I was not good at being an author when I started 20 plus years ago. But with experience and time, I grew to enjoy it. And I've done over these 20 years lots of television appearances and lots of speeches, but I tell you this because it mirrored my experience and journey as a caregiver. I am the caregiver to my husband, Michael, who's in the back there somewhere. Hi. We just celebrated our 21st anniversary. Happy anniversary. And Michael does have Crohn's disease, and he's here today, so I must be a pretty good caregiver, right? I mean, he's healthy enough to be here. But the point is that when I started this caregiving thing, I was just as panic-stricken as I was that day on the Today Show. I just didn't know how to be a caregiver. But I learned from experience and I became pretty good at the job. What is the job? Well, it's caring for someone, a child, a spouse, an elderly parent, grandparent, with a chronic or critical illness or disability. And there are lots of us. There are, last I heard, 65 million in the US alone, and that number is only growing. And by the way, that's just the US. The woman who designs my book covers is living in Germany. She emailed me to say, I got to go back to Belarus where my mother has MS and my grandfather has Alzheimer's, and I got to take care of them. So, I mean, this is a worldwide discussion. But in the US, we're talking 65 million and growing. Why is it growing? Because baby boomers like me are getting older, and as we get older, we're getting sicker, and our parents are getting sicker, and it's something called the silver tsunami, and that's how it is. So I don't think there's anyone that I come across these days who hasn't been touched in some way by the caregiving experience. It's really kind of extraordinary, and I'm willing to bet that in this room today, and I'm not talking about in your professional lives, but in your personal lives, you've had at least some brush with caregiving. What does all this caregiving mean for the healthcare system? Well, it means that those of us who are caring for others are getting sick too. And why? Because we are stressed and stretched and pulled in all directions. And we are sort of making the mistake of taking care of our loved ones with an urgency that we don't apply to ourselves. That's not a good idea. Just some statistics here that you'll find a little staggering. Up to 70% of family caregivers exhibit symptoms of depression. 70%. Nearly 55 skip their own doctor's appointments. 63% have poor eating habits. 58% get less exercise than they used to. And worst of all, family caregivers experience extreme stress that can take as much as 10 years off their lives. Clearly, things need to change. You know, we were on the plane coming here, 2 planes, and, you know, the flight attendant says if the oxygen mask drops down, put it on yourself first, then on your child. Same is true for caregivers. We don't put that oxygen mask on ourselves first and then on our loved one. We're not going to be around. We're just not going to be around.